In the world of Resident Evil, horror isn't just about monsters, viruses, or the end of humanity. It's about people who were taken, broken, experimented on, and forced to survive things no one ever should. Behind every outbreak is a story of a child who lost her family. A child who was left all alone. Of a soldier who lost control of her own body. A soldier who was no longer in command. Of a man who kept fighting, even after death itself. These are not just survivors. They are victims of a world that never gave them a choice. A world that was cruel and unforgiving. This is the story of the top 8 most tragic lives in Resident Evil, where survival is not a victory, but a lifelong burden. A burden that they can never escape. Not all pain looks the same, but this is where it starts to get heavier. Let's begin with Jake Muller. The story of Jake Muller is one of resentment, identity, and a life shaped by a legacy he never asked for in the Resident Evil. He isn't tragic in the same way as Lisa or Sherry. His pain isn't rooted in helplessness. It comes from something quieter and more bitter. Being born into a curse you didn't choose, and hating it while still carrying it. Jake grew up in harsh conditions, never knowing his father. His mother raised him alone, doing everything she could, but life wasn't kind to them. They struggled, constantly. And then, she died, not peacefully, not naturally. She was killed during a bioorganic weapons incident, another casualty in the kind of chaos that defines Resident Evil. Jake didn't just lose his only parent, he lost the one person who gave his life any sense of stability. After that, he was truly alone. With no family, no support, and no direction, Jake grew up hardened. He became a mercenary, not out of ambition, but survival. Trust didn't exist for him, kindness didn't last. Everything had a price. And so he lived by one rule. If the world only takes, then you take back. Jake eventually learns the truth about his father. He is the son of Albert Wesker, not just any man, but one of the most dangerous and infamous figures in the world. Think about what that means for Jake. A father who caused countless deaths, a name associated with destruction and betrayal, a legacy of fear and hatred, and worst of all, that blood runs in him. Jake's blood contains a rare immunity to certain viruses, making him incredibly valuable. But this gift doesn't feel like one. To others, he isn't a person. He's a resource, something to be used, extracted, protected, or captured. His existence becomes transactional. During the events of Resident Evil 6, Jake is captured and imprisoned for months, not as a prisoner of war, but as a living sample. He's experimented on, monitored, treated like an object, and this is where his bitterness deepens. Even when he tries to live on his own terms, the world still reduces him to what he can provide. Jake is paired with Sherry Birkin at first. He's cold and distant, but Sherry understands something about him that others don't. She knows what it's like to be defined by what's inside your body. She doesn't see him as a weapon. She sees him as a person, and slowly, that breaks through his walls. Jake's journey forces him to face what his father was and what he could become. There's anger, disgust, rejection. He doesn't want to be anything like Albert Wesker, but no matter how much he denies it, he can't erase where he came from. That internal conflict defines him. Am I my own person, or just his legacy? In the end, Jake makes a choice. He doesn't follow in his father's footsteps. He doesn't embrace the power for domination or control. Instead, he uses what he has to help stop the spread of bioweapons. It's not a grand redemption. It's not heroic in a traditional sense. It's simply this. He chooses not to become the thing he hates, and in that choice, he finds a sense of peace and a way to move forward slowly, one step at a time, and let go of the past. Alexia Ashford. At first glance, she doesn't seem pitiful at all. She's powerful, intelligent, and in control. But if you look deeper, her life is built on something deeply broken. She was never allowed to be human in the first place. Alexia wasn't born out of love. She was engineered, created using the genes of Veronica Ashford by her father, Alexander Ashford, to restore the prestige of the Ashford family, one of the founders of the Umbrella Corporation. From the moment she existed, she had a purpose: to be perfect. There was no room for weakness, emotion, childhood. She wasn't treated like a daughter, she was treated like a project. Alexia quickly proved to be a prodigy, far surpassing normal human intelligence even as a child. But brilliance came at a cost. She didn't form normal emotional bonds. She didn't learn empathy. She didn't experience love the way others do. Even her relationship with her twin brother, Alfred Ashford, was one-sided. Alfred adored her. Alexia simply used him. Not because she chose to be cruel, but because she was never taught how to be anything else. When Alexia learned the truth about her origins, she didn't break down, she acted. She and Alfred captured their father and experimented on him, transforming him into a monstrous creature. To most people, this is horrifying, but for Alexia, it was logical. He created her as an experiment, so she treated him like one. It's disturbing, but also revealing. She had already lost the ability to see family as something sacred. Alexia's ultimate goal was to surpass humanity itself using the T. Veronica virus. But instead of risking failure, she devised a plan. She would infect herself, then place her body into cryogenic sleep for years, allowing the virus to stabilize. And so she did. She chose to stop living to become something else later. Here's where her tragedy becomes quieter, but deeper. Alexia spends years frozen in isolation, no experiences, no relationships, no growth. Time passes, but she doesn't live through it. Think about that. Her entire life is either controlled experimentation as a child or unconscious existence in a frozen state. She never had friends, freedom, a real childhood, just a goal she was designed to fulfill. When Alexia finally awakens, events of Resident Evil Code Veronica, she is no longer human. The T. Veronica virus has transformed her into something powerful and monstrous. She gains abilities far beyond normal limits. But whatever humanity she might have had, it's gone. Alfred, who spent years alone waiting for her, finally sees her again. For him, it's everything. For her, it barely matters. When Alfred dies, she shows almost no real grief. This is one of the most tragic aspects of her story, the one person who truly loved her, and she cannot return that love. Not because she refuses, but because she no longer knows how. Alexia sees herself as superior, above humanity. She treats others as inferior, disposable. But this arrogance isn't entirely her fault. She was created to believe she was perfect, raised to see herself that way. Never taught humility, empathy, or connection. Her evil is, in many ways, programmed. Alexia is eventually defeated and killed. There's no redemption, no moment of clarity, no emotional resolution. She simply falls, another powerful being destroyed. Alfred Ashford. The story of Alfred Ashford is one of the most disturbing and psychologically tragic in the Resident Evil, not just because of what happened to him, but because of what he became. It's a story of isolation, identity, and a desperate mind trying to hold itself together by breaking completely. Alfred was part of the prestigious Ashford family, one of the founding families of the Umbrella Corporation. But by the time Alfred was born, the Ashford name was already fading. Its glory had turned into obsession. His father, Alexander Ashford, wanted to restore that lost greatness, so he turned to something unnatural. He used preserved genetic material from the legendary ancestor, Veronica Ashford, to create perfect heirs. That's how Alfred and his twin sister, Alexia Ashford, were born. From the beginning, Alfred lived in Alexia's shadow. Alexia wasn't just intelligent, she was a prodigy beyond human limits, cold, calculating, and brilliant. Alfred, in comparison, was ordinary. And in a family obsessed with perfection, ordinary might as well be failure. But Alfred loved Alexia deeply, not just as a sister, but as the only person who ever gave his life meaning. She was his world. When they were still children, Alexia and Alfred discovered the truth about their father's experiments. What they did next is horrifying. They turned on their own father. Together, they experimented on Alexander, transforming him into a grotesque creature. But even here, there's a difference. Alexia did it out of cold ambition. Alfred did it because she told him to. That moment says everything about him. He didn't act out of cruelty. He acted out of devotion. Soon after, Alexia begins her own experiment, injecting herself with the T. Veronica virus. But to do it properly, she places herself into cryogenic sleep for years. And she leaves Alfred behind, just like that. The one person he loved, the one person who defined his entire existence, was gone. Alfred is left alone in the Ashford estate on Rockford Island. Events of Resident Evil Code Veronica. No equals. No family. No emotional support. Just memories and silence. And slowly, his mind begins to break. Unable to cope with the loss, Alfred does something tragic and terrifying. He begins to pretend to be Alexia. Not just acting, believing. He dresses like her. Speaks like her. Switches between identities. It's not deception for others, it's survival for himself. Because without Alexia, he has no identity at all. As time passes, Alfred completely loses his grip on reality. He creates elaborate illusions where Alexia is still with him. He talks to her as if she's alive and present. In his mind, They're still together, still ruling, still complete. But in truth, he's alone, utterly, painfully alone. When outsiders arrive, like Claire Redfield, Alfred reacts with hostility and cruelty. But it doesn't come from simple evil. It comes from a broken mind, a need to protect the illusion, a fear of losing the last piece of Alexia he still has. He lashes out because reality itself is unbearable. Eventually, Alfred is mortally wounded. Dying, weak, and alone, he does the one thing that defines his entire life. He goes to awaken Alexia. Not for power, not for revenge, but because he needs her. Because without her, he is nothing. Alfred dies shortly after reaching her. There's no comfort, no real reunion. Just a broken man, clinging to the idea of the only person he ever loved, until his final breath. Alfred Ashford isn't just a villain. He's a victim of a family obsessed with perfection, a childhood without genuine love, emotional dependence on someone who never truly cared for him. What makes his story so painful is this. Alfred never learned how to exist on his own. He didn't have an identity outside of Alexia. So when she left, he didn't just lose his sister. He lost himself. Leon S. Kennedy. The story of Leon S. Kennedy is a slow, crushing kind of tragedy. Unlike others, Leon doesn't lose himself physically. He loses his innocence, his freedom, and any chance at a normal life, piece by piece, mission by mission. Leon was just a rookie police officer, freshly recruited to the RPD, or Raccoon City Police Department, in Raccoon City. Young, idealistic, he believed in justice, in doing the right thing. But on his very first day, the events of Resident Evil 2, he arrives to a nightmare. The city is already collapsing. Zombies fill the streets. Death is everywhere. There is no first day, no guidance, no one to train him, just survival. Instead of learning how to be a cop, Leon is forced to kill, over and over, people who used to be human, victims who couldn't be saved. And for someone like Leon, that matters. He doesn't see enemies, he sees what they used to be. Every trigger pull chips away at him. In the middle of the chaos, Leon meets Sherry Birkin, a scared, orphaned little girl. Despite everything, Leon takes it upon himself to protect her. Think about that. A rookie cop, already overwhelmed, chooses to carry someone else's survival on his shoulders. He becomes her shield, while barely holding himself together. Leon also meets Ada Wong. In the middle of horror, something human begins to grow, trust, connection, maybe even love. But it's built on lies. Ada is not who she claims to be, she's a spy with her own mission. And just when Leon starts to care about her, she dies right in front of him, or at least, that's what he believes. Imagine surviving hell, only to lose the one person who made it feel less empty. Leon makes it out of Raccoon City alive. But survival isn't freedom. The US government sees his potential and his knowledge. So they give him a choice. Serve them or Sherry suffers. Leon doesn't hesitate. He sacrifices his own freedom to protect her. From that moment on, Leon's life is no longer his. He becomes a government agent, sent into one nightmare after another. He doesn't get to choose peace, and he doesn't get to walk away. He's too valuable and too trapped. In Resident Evil 4, Leon is sent to rescue the president's daughter, Ashley Graham. What he finds is another outbreak, another horror, another situation where people are infected, humanity is twisted, and he has to fight through it alone. This becomes a pattern in his life. Different places, same nightmare. Unlike some characters, Leon doesn't break outwardly. He jokes, he stays calm, and he keeps moving. But that doesn't mean he isn't affected. It means he carries everything silently. The people he couldn't save, the city he watched die, the woman he loved but could never trust, and the life he never got to live. All of it stays with him. Leon continues crossing paths with Ada Wong, and every time, it's the same pain. He cares about her, he wants to trust her, but he knows he can't. She represents everything he lost: connection, trust, something real, but it's always just out of reach. Not fully enemy, not truly ally, never something he can keep. Leon becomes one of the most capable agents in the world. However, what does he have personally? No stable life, no lasting relationships, no peace. He's constantly sent into danger because he's good at surviving it. That's the cruel irony. The better he is, the less chance he has of ever escaping it. Ethan Winters. The story of Ethan Winters is one of the most quietly devastating in Resident Evil. He isn't a trained soldier like Chris. He isn't part of any organization. He's just a normal man who kept losing everything, piece by piece. Ethan was an ordinary systems engineer, living a quiet life with his wife, Mia Winters. When Mia suddenly disappeared, Ethan didn't move on. For 3 years, He lived with uncertainty, no answers, no closure, just hope slowly fading. Then, one day, he receives a message from her. She's alive. For most people, that would be relief. For Ethan, it became the start of his nightmare. Ethan travels to Dulvey, Louisiana. Events of Resident Evil 7. Biohazard, desperate to find Mia. Instead, he finds something broken beyond recognition. Mia is alive, but not herself. She attacks him, violently, unpredictably, like a stranger wearing the face of the person he loves. Imagine the confusion. The person you came to save is trying to kill you. You don't understand why, and you still can't stop caring about them. Ethan is forced to fight Mia, just to survive, not out of anger, but desperation. Ethan is captured by the Baker family, victims themselves, twisted by the mold, and controlled by Evelyn. What Ethan goes through in that house is relentless. He's beaten, hunted, and mutilated. His hand is literally cut off, and later reattached. He's forced to endure pain that would kill a normal person, but he keeps going, not because he's fearless, but because he refuses to give up on Mia. Ethan eventually learns that Evelyn is behind everything, a childlike bioweapon who just wanted a family, no matter the cost. He defeats her and escapes with Mia. It looks like a victory. But here's the cruel truth revealed later. Ethan actually died early during the events in the Baker house. His body was already killed, and what continued living was a mold-based copy, held together by sheer will. He didn't know. For years, he lived thinking he survived, when in reality, he was already something else. After the nightmare, Ethan and Mia try to rebuild their lives. They even have a daughter, Rosemary Winters. For a brief moment, Ethan gets what he always wanted: a family, peace, a second chance. But in Resident Evil, peace never lasts. At the start of Resident Evil Village, their home is attacked by Chris Redfield. Mia is shot, Rose is taken, and Ethan is thrown back into chaos again. No explanation, no time to process, just loss. Ethan is taken to a remote village filled with horrors, ruled by Mother Miranda. His daughter has been split into pieces, literally. And Ethan's mission becomes unthinkable. He must recover his child, piece by piece, from monsters who treat her like an object. Still, he presses forward, through Lady Dimitrescu's castle, twisted experiments, psychological torment. Every step is driven by one thing: I need to save my daughter. Throughout Village, Ethan suffers injuries that no human could survive: limbs torn apart, organs damaged, constant physical trauma. Yet he keeps moving. Because he doesn't know the truth, he's already dead. His body is decaying, barely holding together through the mold. He isn't surviving because he's strong, he's surviving because he can't die normally anymore. Near the end, Ethan learns the reality. He died back in Louisiana. Everything he's done since then, every step, every fight, every act of love, was done by something that shouldn't exist. And yet, he never stopped being human where it mattered. In the end, Ethan rescues Rose, but his body is finally failing. There's nothing left to hold him together. Knowing he doesn't have much time, he makes one last choice. He gives his daughter to Chris and stays behind to stop the threat once and for all, alone, dying, but at peace with one thing: his daughter will live. Ethan Winters isn't tragic because he was turned into a monster. He's tragic because he lost his life without knowing it. He kept fighting without understanding why he could endure so much. He gained a family, only to lose it again, and in the end, he had to give up everything just to protect it. What hurts most is this: Ethan never wanted any of this. He wasn't chasing glory, he wasn't seeking revenge, he just wanted his family. If Lisa Trevor is endless suffering, Sherry Birkin is stolen childhood, Jill Valentine is stolen control, Ethan Winters is quiet sacrifice, loving so deeply that he kept going, even after he was already gone. Jill Valentine. The story of Jill Valentine is tragic in a different way from Lisa or Sherry. She doesn't lose her humanity, she loses her freedom, her identity, and even control over her own body. Jill Valentine was a highly skilled member of STRS, Special Tactics and Rescue Service. In Resident Evil, she was intelligent, calm under pressure, and one of the best operatives in Raccoon City. But even early on, Jill wasn't untouched by trauma. The mansion incident exposed her to bioorganic horrors no human should ever see: zombies, experiments, betrayal from within like Albert Wesker. She survived, but survival came with scars. During the events of Resident Evil 3, Nemesis and its remake, Jill faces one of the most relentless horrors in the series, the Nemesis. This creature wasn't just a monster, it was designed to hunt her specifically. Imagine being chased endlessly through a dying city by something that never stops, never tires, never forgets you. Jill runs, fights, survives, but the fear is constant. There's no safety, no rest. At one point, Jill is infected with the T-virus. Her body burns with fever. She collapses, helpless, hovering between life and death. For someone as strong and independent as Jill, this moment is truly devastating. She becomes completely powerless, reliant on others to save her. She survives, but again, not without cost. After escaping Raccoon City, Jill becomes obsessed with bringing down the Umbrella Corporation. She can't move on. She can't forget. The trauma keeps her tied to the fight. While others might try to rebuild their lives, Jill continues chasing the nightmare, because she knows it isn't over. Socorro, the moment everything is taken. Years later, during a mission with Chris Redfield, Jill confronts Albert Wesker again, events of Resident Evil 5 backstory. To save Chris, she sacrifices herself, falling into darkness with Wesker. For Chris, she's gone dead. But death would have been truly kinder. Jill survives the fall, only to be captured by Wesker. What follows is one of the cruelest fates in Resident Evil. She is experimented on, altered, and placed under mind control using a device that overrides her will. Jill Valentine, the woman who fought to protect others, becomes a weapon. When she reappears, she's no longer herself. She fights against her allies, and she hunts the very people she once trusted. But deep inside, Jill is still there. Imagine being aware, somewhere in your mind, that your body is being used to hurt your friends, and being completely unable to stop it. That's not just physical suffering, that's psychological torture. Every movement isn't yours, every action is forced, and your identity is stripped away. Eventually, Chris and his allies manage to free her from Wesker's control. But freedom doesn't erase what happened. Jill has to live with the memory of being controlled, the actions she was forced to take, and the years stolen from her life. She didn't just fight monsters, she became one against her will. After Resident Evil 5, Jill largely disappears from the spotlight for years. This absence itself feels tragic. A hero who gave everything, who endured more than most, and yet, she fades into the background, carrying trauma that isn't fully explored or healed. Jill Valentine's tragedy isn't about death, it's about losing control. She fought to protect others and was turned into a weapon. She survived horror, only to be enslaved by it. She kept her humanity, but couldn't control her own actions. What makes it especially painful is this: Jill is strong, capable, and brave, and none of that could protect her from being violated in the most personal way possible, her own mind and body taken from her. Sherry Birkin. The story of Sherry Birkin is a different kind of tragedy from Lisa Trevor's, but no less painful. Where Lisa's suffering was hidden in darkness, Sherry's was lived out in a collapsing world, as a child who just wanted her parents. Sherry Birkin was the daughter of two brilliant scientists, William Birkin and Annette Birkin, both deeply involved with the Umbrella Corporation. On the surface, she had everything: intelligence, security, a future. But emotionally, she was truly alone. Her parents were consumed by their work. Long hours, little affection, cold conversations. Sherry wasn't abused, but she was neglected in the quietest, most painful way. She simply wasn't a priority. Even before the horror began, she was a child growing up without warmth. Everything changed during the Raccoon City destruction incident, events of Resident Evil 2. A viral outbreak turned the city into chaos. Zombies, monsters, death everywhere. Sherry, still just a little girl, found herself alone in a city collapsing around her. No parents, no protection, just fear. She wandered through dark streets, police stations, and sewers, places no child should ever be, trying to survive. Here's where her story becomes especially cruel. Her father, William Birkin, was mortally wounded and injected himself with the G-virus, transforming into a grotesque, evolving monster. But even as a monster, one instinct remained. He sought Sherry not out of love, but because the virus drove him to implant embryos into compatible hosts, his own daughter included. Imagine the terror, being chased through darkness by your own father, no longer human, wanting to use your body as a host. That kind of fear doesn't just scar you, it changes you forever. At one point, Sherry is captured and infected with the G-virus. Her small body begins to break down under something it can't handle, and she becomes weak, feverish, dying slowly. She didn't understand what was happening. She just knew she was in pain. And still, no parents to comfort her. Her mother, Annette, is nearby during parts of this, but even then, Annette prioritizes stopping the virus over fully protecting or comforting her daughter. Sherry is always second to the mission. After being rescued, notably by Claire Redfield, Sherry survives thanks to a vaccine, but the infection changes her. She develops regenerative abilities due to traces of the virus still in her body. Instead of being allowed to heal and live a normal life, she's taken in by the US government, not as a child in need of care, but as an asset. She grows up under constant surveillance, used because of what's inside her, not who she is. Even in safety, she isn't truly free. By the time we see her again in Resident Evil 6, Sherry is an adult working as a government agent. She's strong, capable, and composed. But that strength comes from everything she lost. Her entire childhood was taken from her. No loving home, no parents, no normal life, no chance to just be a kid. Instead, she was shaped by fear, loss, and being treated like a living experiment. Sherry's tragedy isn't just about horror, it's about emotional neglect and loss. She was ignored before the disaster, abandoned during it, and used afterward. Even the people who cared about her couldn't give her a normal life. What makes it hit hardest is this. Sherry never stopped being human. She understood everything she lost. She remembers her parents, she remembers being alone, she remembers the fear, and she has to live with it. Lisa Trevor. Lisa Trevor was just a child, the daughter of George Trevor, the architect who designed the infamous Spencer Mansion for Oswell E. Spencer. She wasn't a soldier, a spy, or a criminal, just an innocent girl who loved her family, especially her mother. And that's what makes everything that follows so, truly disturbing. After George Trevor completed the mansion, Spencer had him and his family captured because Spencer didn't want anyone knowing the mansion's secrets. Lisa and her mother were imprisoned and turned into test subjects for the early experiments of the Umbrella Corporation. Imagine being a child, suddenly taken from your home, locked in a cold, unfamiliar place, surrounded by strangers who see you not as a person, but as material. Lisa was subjected to horrifying experiments involving the progenitor virus, a precursor to many of the viruses seen later in the series. Most test subjects died quickly, but Lisa didn't. She survived. But survival was not mercy, it was a curse. Her body began to mutate, twisting and growing stronger, but her mind shattered slowly, and every experiment brought more pain, more confusion, more loss of who she once was. At one point, Lisa's mother was also experimented on and eventually killed. But Lisa didn't understand death anymore. She believed her mother was still alive, or that she could somehow bring her back. This is where it becomes especially tragic. Lisa began attaching faces, literally, to her body. She wore them, believing one of them might be her mother's face. Not out of cruelty, but out of desperate, broken hope, and a longing that would never subside. Lisa was kept alive for decades, locked beneath the Spencer Mansion, and she became something inhuman, nearly immortal, unable to die, no matter how much damage she took. But she was still there inside, somewhere a lost child, trapped in a monstrous body. She wandered the dark tunnels, clutching memories she couldn't fully understand, repeating fragments of thoughts about her mother. No friends, no sunlight, no escape. Only pain and confusion stretching endlessly. Even as a monster, Lisa's actions weren't driven by evil, but by grief and longing. She searched endlessly for her mother, attacking anyone she encountered, not out of hatred, but because she couldn't comprehend what was happening anymore. In a twisted way, she was still that same little girl, just broken beyond repair. When the mansion incident occurs, during the events of Resident Evil and its remake, Lisa eventually reaches her mother's remains. For a brief moment, it's like something inside her finally understands. And then, she lets go. She falls into the abyss, ending her long, tortured existence, not in rage, but in a quiet, tragic release. Lisa Trevor isn't just another monster in Resident Evil. She's a victim, arguably one of the most tragic in the entire series. She never chose any of this. She never understood what was happening, and she never stopped loving her mother. Her story is horror at its most painful, not just fear of death, but fear of losing everything that makes you human and still being forced to live. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the tragedies of Resident Evil, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.